Hello there, welcome to That Japanese Man Yuta podcast. It's 12 past midnight here in Tokyo. So again, I'm recording this late at night. And how are you guys doing? It's been a while. I think it's been almost 10 days since I made an episode the last time. Did you miss me? Well, I'm not that needy, don't worry. I'm actually the opposite of needy, so a lot of people think I'm kind of too distant. But what am I talking about? Well, today I was being interviewed by my friend because she was making this documentary for her class at university, and it was about dating in Japan, so I was kind of like a very suitable person because I just published a book about dating in Japan. And it was quite fun. I mean, being interviewed. I genuinely enjoy interviewing. I mean, both interviewing and being interviewed, which is kind of good because I tend to do well at job interviews. So I think that's a good skill to have. Anyway, so today I'm gonna talk about some of the countries I've been to because I remember somebody suggest that I talk about countries I've been to. I'm not sure if you guys are, interested in this. So let me know if you think it's interesting. I will talk more about the countries, and if you think it's boring, I'll probably talk about something else. So I have been to about 30 countries so far, so obviously I'm not going to talk about all of them at the same time. I will just talk about Asian countries I've ever been to in this episode. So in Asia, I've been to India, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore, Shanghai, South Korea, and Taiwan. And okay, I was in India for 2 months, so I think India deserves a whole episode. So I'm gonna talk about the rest of the countries. Now, Thailand, I've only been to Bangkok. And you know what? I really liked it. I mean, I love Thai food already. So Thai food was amazing in Thailand, obviously. And I also kind of liked the people. They were kind of shy. People tend to think that Japanese people are shy, but I had the impression that Thai people were even more shy. And also, they're very soft-spoken, at least in Bangkok. But at the same time, some of them spoke very good English, much more than in Japan. For example, if you go to a random restaurant in Tokyo and say something like, "Do you have milkshake here?" And when they don't, in Japan, they will probably say something like, no milkshake. And that's kind of like, it's kind of the English they speak. But in Bangkok, if I ask the same question, do you have milkshake? They would probably say something like, "Sorry, we don't have milkshake here." Do you see the difference? In Japan, it's more like broken English, but in Bangkok, at least my experience was that they spoke 4 sentences, and I think that's a huge difference. Because I remember asking about drinks in a cafe, and they explained to me, the different kinds of drinks in perfect English. So I was very impressed. And it was quite hot and kind of sticky, humid, but I didn't really mind it. I think I'm quite okay with tropical weather, but some people don't like it, so. And Thailand has some cute stuff. Okay, if you ask me what I like about Japan, I will say I like how Japan has so much cute stuff. I mean, like fluffy, stuffed animals, random cute keychains, cute characters, and Japan is like cute explosion, and that's something I like about Japan. And yeah, Thailand definitely has that. Do you guys know what Line is? Line is a very popular messaging app in Japan, and apparently it's sort of popular in Thailand as well, because I saw a lot of lion characters. You know, they have like Corny, the bunny. She's quite cute. I actually have this Corny stuffed fluffy animal in my room. I don't know, I'll probably show it on my main YouTube channel someday. And lion characters are quite cute. And I saw this, oh yeah, I saw this train in Bangkok, and some lion characters were painted on the train. That was fantastic. We don't, even in Japan, we don't have that. So I definitely liked the cute aspect of Thailand. And I would love to go back to Thailand. Actually, I kind of want to live in Bangkok maybe, for a few months. That will be an interesting experience. Oh, I forgot to tell you this, but I went to a club in Bangkok and I was really impressed. It was a really classy, nice kind of club with the latest, kind of like lighting and everything. And it was also free entrance. That was amazing. And I was also quite impressed that Thai girls, they could dance. Japanese people can't dance. That's too bad because I love dancing. So Thailand, I really liked it. Next, Singapore. So I was only there for like maybe 4 days, so that wasn't a long time. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to tell this. I don't know, but I was staying in a certain area in Singapore, which was kind of famous for, let's just say, sexy stuff. During night when I was going back to my hotel, I saw a lot of, let's just say, kind of sexy chaos. Yeah, on my way back to my hotel. That was very interesting, but overall, my impression is that Singapore is kind of a very serious country. So if you're from Singapore, let me know, what you think. But I think it's the kind of country where, I think that's the kind of country where people study hard and work hard, even though they have good clubs, for example. But I have the impression that the people, it's not necessarily the best country to have fun. And if you're Singaporean, I know you have different views, so please let me know. But at the same time, Singapore was quite interesting because it's like an Asian hub. So I saw a lot of different kinds of Asian people in Singapore. So I liked, I liked that a lot. There's one Singaporean YouTube channel I like, which is Wow Banana, and I find it quite funny, so I definitely get Singaporean humor. And it may be a serious country, but Singaporean people can be quite funny. Now, let's talk about the Philippines. There's something I really liked about the Philippines. Okay, I've been there twice. I usually don't go to the same country twice, but the first time I went to Cebu. It was really good. So the second time I decided to go to Manila. And I was a bit worried because, some people have told me that things can get kind of sketchy in Manila, but it was completely okay. I mean, like I was staying one of the nicer areas, Makati. So I'm pretty sure that's only a very specific aspect of the Philippines. Because around Manila, there are like different areas and different cities and different people with different social backgrounds. So yeah, where I stayed, it was like probably the most classiest part of Manila. But I think the best thing about the Philippines is its people. Because, okay, let's face it, Manila, there's not really much to see. I actually asked a bunch of people in Manila, like Filipino people, okay, where do you suggest that I go? Like, what's the interesting parts of Manila? And almost everybody said to me, there's nothing to see in Manila. But I just enjoy talking to people in the Philippines, and many people speak English fluently. so I was able to talk about a lot of stuff, and I talked to some random people. Some of them didn't want to talk to me, but some of them did want to talk to me, so I was kind of like hanging out with random people sometimes, and it was very interesting as well. And I also enjoyed a slightly challenging aspect of traveling Manila, because the public transport isn't very obvious for outsiders. There were a few train lines, but otherwise you have to take jeepneys to get anywhere. And jeepneys are, if you guys are not familiar, it's kind of like route taxi. It's something between taxis and buses. So they just go the same route over and over again, so you can just jump in wherever you want and you just get off wherever you want. But if you are an outsider, it's not obvious like where jeepneys go, so you have to kind of like figure this out on your own. There are some websites, but it can be quite intimidating if you're not familiar with jeepneys. So that was kind of challenging, but that was also a very interesting part of traveling, so I definitely did enjoy that. And I used the only 2 Tagalog words I knew, which was para po, which means stop please. So that's what you say when you want to get off. Alright, the next country is South Korea. The first impression of South Korea is it kind of looks like Japan, except it's not. The thing is, they have a lot of Japanese, for example, convenience stores like Family Marts and stuff. And the way that city looks is kind of Japanese. I mean, like the how the roads look and everything. But at the same time, everything was in Korean, so it was a very interesting mix for me. What I liked most about South Korea was definitely the food. Korean food tends to be very spicy, and I love spicy food. And even though Korean food is relatively popular in Japan, there are definitely many kinds of Korean food that you can't really get in Japan. So I really enjoyed trying different restaurants in South Korea. I was staying in a very small but nice hostel. The Korean staff was very friendly as well. And I met some like a German guy and Hawaiian girl, and we went out to a club together, and that was very interesting. And Korean people were surprisingly friendly with me. Once I wanted to send a letter to my friend, but I didn't know where the post office was, so I had to ask for the direction. I remember going into a university and asking a random girl, excuse me, do you speak English? Do you know where the post office is? And she was quite happy to help. And she spoke some English, although it was far from, being fluent. And I remember that she was kind of nervous because she had to speak English. So it kind of reminded me of Japan, because I would imagine if I was a foreigner in Japan and asked a random Japanese girl for a direction, maybe they would be kind of like nervous but a bit excited. And when I was there, a friend of mine lived there. She was French, so me and her boyfriend went to a restaurant and had some Korean food. And the interesting part is we all spoke Japanese, because she met her Korean boyfriend in Japan, and they spoke Japanese because that was their common language. So that was kind of interesting to speak Japanese with 2 non-native Japanese speakers from different countries. There were also many interesting differences between South Korea and Japan, because I think we are kind of similar, but in a way, I had the impression that South Korea was much more kind of Americanized, and people were much more expressive. For example, if you see Korean couples, they kind of express that they are a couple, so they kind of link arms together. No, they hold hands together in a very intense way that normal Japanese couples don't. And I was also surprised because I was staying around the Hongik area, and after midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning, for example, there were still a bunch of shops and restaurants open, and there were a lot of people walking, down the streets and everything, and that was something interesting. And in Japan, I think it only happens in Roppongi, but Roppongi is kind of like very expat touristy area. But I think Hongik area, they were mostly like Korean students and so Korean people, so that was very different. Actually, I'm quite interested in knowing differences and similarities between Japan and South Korea, so maybe I can just collaborate with some like South Korean YouTubers. Anyway, so the next place is Shanghai. Now, that was actually last year, and that was my very first time going to China. China is a very interesting country. It's very close to Japan, and also China has had a huge influence over Japan. For example, if you speak Japanese, probably half the words are actually Chinese words, and we use a lot of Chinese letters and Japanese letters, like hiragana and katakana. It was originally kanji Chinese letters, so China is like the mother of Japanese culture. But at the same time, it's a very different country with very different people and political system. So China was sort of like a very mysterious country to me. But when I actually went there, I realized that China was much more similar to Japan than I had thought, especially Shanghai, which is a huge city. And I definitely felt that it was quite similar to Tokyo. And I also felt quite safe. People in Shanghai were kind of similar to people in Tokyo, because in Japan we have this image of like Chinese tourists who can be quite aggressive sometimes, but I think that the stereotypical Chinese tourists in Japan are the totally different kind of people from like the average Chinese people in Shanghai. I also had the impression that the people in Shanghai were probably not the friendliest people in East Asia. And that was actually quite similar to Tokyo, because people in Tokyo are not that friendly at all. Although probably in Shanghai there are a little more scam going on. I did get ripped off in Shanghai, but I kind of asked for it because I got curious. But I actually made a YouTube video about that, so if you are curious, you can check that video out. But yeah, in a way, Shanghai was much more normal than I had thought. So I would definitely love to know more about China and figure out our similarities and differences. So the last country, well, it's not exactly a country, let's say like the last place I talk about today is Taiwan. And you know what? I just loved Taiwan. I don't know why. Just in a way, I could say Taiwan is like, I wouldn't say better, but there were definitely something very positive about Taiwan, especially Taiwanese people. I mean, like, Taiwanese people were probably the nicest people I've ever met in East Asia, if not in the entire world. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe it was because I was Japanese in a way. But again, Taiwanese people can be quite similar to Japanese people, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I spoke English, so they definitely knew I was a foreigner. I don't know. I'm curious if you have been to Taiwan, please let me know about your experience. And if you are from Taiwan, please let me know if Taiwanese people are also nice to you. Because Tokyo is like that. That many tourists said that people in Tokyo are so nice. I mean tourists, I mean like Western people and especially white people. But if you are a Japanese person, people in Tokyo are not so nice. So maybe in Taiwan that might have been the case. So let me know what you think. And I saw a lot of cute stuff in Taiwan as well. I mean, like, I think I like any country that has cute stuff. And I also find Taiwanese people, quite attractive. And, well, Taiwanese food, I mean, like, restaurants in Taiwan, they were very good. I mean, like, wow. I mean, I forgot to mention this, but the food is very good in Shanghai as well. I would say like Chinese food in China is better than any kind of Chinese food I've eaten elsewhere, which kind of makes sense because Chinese food is from China. But still, I was very pleasantly surprised that the Chinese food was so good. And I don't usually eat Chinese food that much in Japan, but since I've been to China, I came to appreciate Chinese food much, much more. So my trip to Shanghai and Taiwan had a very positive effect. I mean, like, I'd always felt that the kind of like, image of China that we have in Japan is kind of very biased by the media. I think the actual normal China is much more diverse, much more nicer, and much more interesting than many Japanese people think. Whew, yes. I feel like I talked too much today. Oh, one last thing. So the Asian country I want to visit next will be Indonesia. I'm quite interested in Indonesia. I hear a lot of good things about Indonesia, and also it's actually the biggest Muslim country in the world. But at the same time, it can be quite modern. I mean, like, I think gender equality in Indonesia is pretty good, and quite possibly much, much better than in Japan. That's the country I'm interested in at the moment. Alright, so I guess that's it for today, and I'm not sure how many people are still listening, because it's quite long, so just let me know if you enjoyed this episode or not. I'm quite open to any criticism, and if you are watching this on YouTube, you can just leave a comment in the comment section. And if you are listening to this elsewhere, you can go to yutaaoki.com/podcast. It's yutaaoki.com/podcast. Alright, see you guys soon. Ciao, ciao.